webinar series. This is webinar number 39. And if you are new to the webinar, so this is Reclaim Network Plus, which is funded by the GCARE. So there are the three councils, EPSRC, NERC, and HRC, and the network has got collaborators from the four other universities, except the University of Surrey, which is the lead. So, so this is the team. So my name is Prashant Kumar. So I lead the Reclaim Network Plus. I've got colleagues from the UKCH, Bangor, Warwick, Bath, and they bring the very diverse, the expertise which relates to the different aspects of the urban greening and the nature-based solutions. And this is supported by our network managers. The Charlotte has been doing quite a lot of work in the background, so thanks to her, and the Mark, who has been the project manager. So, so if you just say very briefly, the webinar we have been running, for a very long time now. So it's every month between 12:30 to 13:30. Usually two speakers, one coming from industry, one usually coming from non-industrial or academic world. And all these webinars are recorded, and you can find those webinars on our YouTube channel, and we will post the link to you. So, so network has grown quite a lot. So we started with like 40 members. It was supposed to be 2 years, and then we got extension for another year, and then another half a year. So this will run through February 2026. We got over 704 members coming from very diverse sort of, the background, including industry, the policy making, research, and obviously, there are lots of practitioners involved in it, and they're interested in different areas, as you can see, on the left-hand side. So there has been a lot of activities of the, the network, and one of them includes the webinar, but there has been workshops, large events, the GBGI database, which we are building, and we'll be launching very soon the CPD courses around it. So you will know more about that possibly in the next webinar. So yeah, I mean, if you are interested in the obviously in the green infrastructure thing, so there is quite a lot of work going around, and we try to promote the work. So one of those work is related to the surveys, and we can post the survey into on the chat box, and if you can fill the survey, that'd be very helpful to the researchers who are researching in this particular area. So without any further ado, we got three fantastic speakers today. And our first speaker is Dr. Sarah Clement. She's Associate Professor from Australian National University. And then two fantastic speakers, Rachel Grice and Catherine Pineo from the Royal Society of Arts. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. But before I do that, I'd like to also make a few things from the housekeeping perspective. So if you have any questions, please put your questions in Q&A box, and you can write your name and your affiliation. So what we'll do is we'll have 20 minutes each on the first presentations, and then we'll read out your your questions to our speaker. So please use the Q&A box. These webinars are recorded, so you can also see them on the YouTube channel, and we'll post the link there. And apart from that, I think, so I guess I can possibly introduce our first speaker. So Dr. Sarah Clement, she's an Associate Professor at the Fenner School of Environment and Society at the Australian National University. She's worked on environmental management and policy for over 20 years and has worked in policy, practice, and academia in the US, UK, and Australia. Her research focuses on how to more effectively manage human impacts on the environment, especially with respect to biodiversity loss, climate adaptation, natural hazards, and urban development. Her work on nature-based solutions focuses primarily on how they can be used to address societal challenges in cities. And she's speaking from Australia. So thank you very much for taking time from your evening and sharing this wonderful presentation with the network colleagues. Thank you. Yeah, over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, so if I make any mistakes, I can just use the excuse that it's late here. It's almost 10 o'clock. But this picture here is where I'm talking to you from. This is Canberra, which is the bush capital, if you know it, in Australia. So it is a very green city. But I'm going to actually talk about some work that I did in the UK, and I know a lot of you will be from the UK, in Liverpool, actually. So what I wanted to talk about was that we have this idea, right, of nature-based solutions that are this umbrella concept that, you know, covers a lot of different types of greening or ecosystem-based restoration, SUDs. I'm sure you've had the webinars have probably covered all of these different things. And it's a term that's fairly new, right? It's like 23 years old. And what does it promise us that's new? What's the value of kind of this new framing, and are we actually achieving that? So I quite like the idea of nature-based solutions because it has this idea that we have a bunch of challenges that we're facing, and they're societal challenges, social, economic, environmental challenges, and nature can actually offer a solution. But there's also this idea that nature-based solutions can be transformative. We're seeing them in a lot of policies like the Global Biodiversity Framework, and IPBES, and a lot of these like international platforms are really focusing on them because it's, you know, it's very appealing that we can use nature to address complex societal challenges, but that they're also, you know, more efficient than some more traditional engineered solutions. They can be super innovative. But what I really wanted to talk about today was the kind of idea that many people talk about, and it's in international policy, in many of the international standards, that nature-based solutions should be co-produced with communities and stakeholders. They should be co-designed, and therefore they should be more democratic. And we use these terms co-produced and co-designed. I'm not sure that we all know what they mean, but it's kind of the idea that you co-produce the knowledge, you co-produce the idea of what are the challenges, what might the solutions be, and then you're co-designing the interventions with the people who stand to benefit from them the most, and the people that have the expertise. And the EU is like probably investing the most out of anyone when we talk about internationally in nature-based solutions. But there are also many other countries that are investing in nature-based solutions, and it's becoming increasingly very popular in the overseas development aid space, of saying that, you know, we're going to invest in nature-based solutions in developing countries as part of our global commitments to address climate change adaptation. There's a whole bunch of other things that I don't have time to get into. What I found very interesting, so I teach urban sustainability. Also, I do a field course in Singapore, and this idea of co-production and co-design is even in Singapore. And I don't think that a lot of us would think about that. We wouldn't necessarily think about democracy in Singapore hand in hand, not necessarily, but it's become such a big thing of like, when we're greening cities, we need to co-produce and co-design it with these communities. And it just all sounds fantastic. We have more just, more sustainable cities that have better governance and engaged citizenry. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about whether or not the rhetoric of that matches the reality and what we might need to do to live up to those ambitions. So some of you, but maybe not all of you, might be aware of the global standard for nature-based solutions. And I quite like this global standard. The case study I'm going to talk to you about was one of the first sets of case studies to test the global standard. I've been involved in kind of helping them to refine it. We're producing a bunch of case studies out of this. But if you actually look at the principles in the global standard, a lot of these have to do with good governance, and thinking about the kind of social dimensions that kind of link into this idea of co-production and co-design. At least principle 7 there, principle 8. You have principle 4, that's fair and equitable benefits. The specific natural and cultural context. So a lot of these actually touch on the democratic principles, but we are often funding nature-based solutions as a kind of technical solution to particular problems. And I think if we're going to promise that what NBS have to offer as a point of difference from other greening approaches is that they are more just, equitable, and democratic, then we need to, kind of investigate whether or not we're actually doing that. So one of the projects that, this is the project that we actually tested the global standard against, and this was the Urban Green Up project, which is funded by Horizon 2020. I'm sure someone's probably, maybe Ian Mell talked about this when he did his presentation, but these are the cities that were involved in it. It's got 3 kind of front runner cities in Europe, and then the quote unquote follower cities that are in Europe as well as elsewhere. And this was not an academic project. I am an academic, but this was a demonstration project that actually designed and implemented nature-based solutions and kind of tried to develop a transferable approach for doing this in different cities that have very different contexts. And all very different governance systems. I don't have time, obviously, in these 15 minutes to touch on them all. So just to touch on Liverpool a little bit, because I think this is an example of where there was real potential in Liverpool. I hope some of you will know about the context of Liverpool, but if you don't, it is a kind of post-industrial city that was highly developed. It's a very gray city that has a lot of potential for greening, but it has, as many cities do in the UK and elsewhere, very inequitable distribution of green space. The poorer areas tend to have less green space than the richer areas. So nature-based solutions would be a great thing to implement in a city like this. But it can be really challenging when you are kind of retrofitting green solutions into a very gray city. You have a city that has a history of austerity, a lot of political challenges, political corruption, and also there are a lot of environmental issues like air pollution, flooding, water quality challenges, not much biodiversity when you have a bunch of concrete. So it's really an ideal place to realize co-benefits of nature-based solutions. And we had all of these metrics. So what we did is we implemented nature-based solutions in these 3 areas. What I would normally do is I would go through and I would show you how the actual challenges, even if you were to do just a desktop analysis, are not in these 3 areas so much. You would, there are other areas of the city that are much more in need of greening, much more in need of nature-based solutions. But those are places where it might take a lot longer to plan and implement nature-based solutions, and the communities, by some people's accounts, might be more challenging to work with. And so decisions were made to, not by me, I am not a decision maker in this context, I am just an academic studying it, to implement nature-based solutions in these 3 areas. And we, tested what were the impacts. We monitored a whole bunch of, it's probably over 50 indicators before and after the interventions were implemented to see what difference they made. And if you actually look at, if you look at those metrics, there's not a lot of them that are related to democracy, and and kind of inclusion and the kind of social elements, and I will touch on why that is later. But these are the interventions, some examples of the interventions. They're very small scale. I won't get into the whole thing about the fact that they are not landscape scale, which is also one of the principles of nature-based solutions. They're quite small interventions. A lot of that has to do with just the situation in Liverpool. And if you look here on the table on the left, you can see that very similar types of interventions were implemented across the lead cities and urban green up, and they're all quite small interventions. You can call all of them, nature-based solutions: green walls, pollinator pillars, citizen science, sustainable urban drainage systems, implementing like verges with wildflowers and also floating islands and that sort of thing. These are all pretty typical of a lot of the nature-based solutions projects in Europe. This is not a criticism at all of what happened in Liverpool specifically. This is what's happening in a lot of the cities in these nature-based solutions projects. It's really challenging to implement, large-scale interventions in a city that is already developed. It's very different to, say, Singapore, for example. And then the things that were considered social were non-technical interventions. So those were the things that were kind of your feel-good stuff that you did, that you reported on, that we all reported on. This was not just Liverpool. Of we invited people out to plant things and come and do community gardens, stuff like that. And this project is nominated for many awards, and it won many awards. And so there is a lot of in terms of the professional community, there's been a lot of really positive feedback about this project. But I think one of the issues that I have with a lot of the nature-based solutions literature, and why this presentation is a bit of a provocation of, maybe if we are going to talk about nature-based solutions being a solution to particular problems, we need to think about whether or not the people that they're meant to serve actually think they are a solution to those problems. So what we found in our study was that the way that this project is funded, and a lot of these projects are funded, is you have to apply for the funding, you get the funding, they tell you have to co-produce and co-design this thing, but there's very little flexibility to change what you're actually going to do. And then you implement the solutions, and then the public is like, you might consult with the public, you might engage them in some planting and some various things, but they're like, I'm not sure that this is actually serving our needs. And that's exactly what we found, is that we found that the public really understands what greening offers to cities. They understood that, it can improve water quality, it can address climate change challenges, it can improve biodiversity. It was not a knowledge issue. It was not like people just don't understand. They were like, green stuff is good. Obviously, green stuff is good. But we don't think necessarily that green stuff that you did is good. In addition to that, a lot of these interventions only really had modest measured improvements. And you'll see this in a lot of the nature-based solutions literature, where there's a lot of modeling that might say that it did a lot, but there's not necessarily really strong evidence, unless we're talking outside of cities. I'm talking in cities right now. They often don't provide a lot of strong evidence that this new nature-based solution that they have implemented has been kind of transformative in the way that it's been promised. And also that some of these nature-based solutions can make some of these problems worse if you don't kind of think through exactly where they're implemented. So we did, as I say, evaluate the project according to the global standard, with the caveat that the global standard didn't exist when this project was designed. And as you can see there in number 5, the principle of inclusive governance, it didn't do so well, has about 20% as a scoring for the criterion. And I do not blame, I think the team that implemented Urban Green Up in Liverpool were fantastic. I do not blame them at all. But when you have a funding system that was, as we had, that said, well, you must co-produce and co-design these things with the community, but you also must do what you said that you were going to do in the proposal. And if you deviate from that proposal at all, you will have to do a very large amendment and have to go through, it took us like a year and a half, or at least over a year, to do one of our amendments. That's not really co-production. Then you add to it that there's the kind of history that I don't have time to get into around not necessarily trusting what the city is going to do. And then they go ahead and they implement all these green things and don't really consult the community. You kind of limit your democratic ambitions to co-produce and co-design, and nature-based solutions, they're such a different way of greening cities. And we weren't able to really have a lot of meaningful metrics for democracy, participation, and inclusion, because we were instructed that we had to use this particular framework called the Eclipse framework that all of the urban Horizon 2020 projects had to do. So when you combine that limited engagement and the issues with funding, you had limited ownership over those nature-based solutions, and many of them have been removed. And that doesn't just apply to Liverpool, that applies to many of those nature-based solutions and many of the Horizon 2020 projects. There's also, if anyone knows Scousers, and this is part of the reason that I love Liverpool with all of my heart, Scousers do not like, they call people out when they kind of say, they promise things and they don't actually deliver. And what you see in a project like this is that there's like this local skepticism that, oh, you know, you're promoting that you've invested all this money in these nature-based solutions, what I call shiny things, these innovative shiny things that you've done. But this is an absence of actually addressing the inequality in accessible green space, meaningfully engaging with the communities, especially those who stand to benefit the most, having interventions that are actually at scale. If you think back to the monitoring of where they said, oh, we actually don't think that your interventions did that much. And, you know, actually changing your policies and elevating sustainability on the political agenda. We're not, the public is kind of not really convinced that it's a genuine approach. We do have quite a, like, you know, there's a list of examples where they now are mentioning nature-based solutions and considering urban greening when they're, you know, making decisions about building roads and other things. But the idea, it's not really kind of changed the way that they've thought about developing the city. And that has, you know, impacts for ongoing investment in maintenance and other things. So when taking this outside of Liverpool, some of the broader issues that I wanted to raise is, as you can probably imagine, I think that funding conditions are highly problematic because they can significantly constrain the less tangible ambitions of nature-based solutions. And that includes this, you know, co-production, co-design. We're going to make cities that are greener, more inclusive. They're for everyone. You know, these solutions are going to be a solution for everyone. Co-design is often required, but it's not necessarily supported. It's not dedicated funding. You don't tend to get like, okay, we're going to fund this project, and then you're going to get a couple of years to co-design and co-produce. And then there's that limited flexibility that I talked about earlier. And then doing so if you were to actually do that, and I understand why people are reluctant to do that, it challenges those kind of those standard accountability metrics, where it's like, okay, we spend money on planting this many trees, on restoring this much wetland, you know, building this much corridor. It is investing money in a non-tangible thing. But if you're going to try to live up to the rhetoric that we are developing solutions for actual challenges that people are facing, you need to understand what challenges they think they are facing, which we weren't even able to do as part of this project, and then what solutions they think would help address those challenges. That doesn't mean that you would have to, you know, align yourself with exactly what they thought those solutions should be, but it should inform how you design things. A broader issue is also rebadging the existing efforts, because nature-based solutions are an umbrella term. A lot of the investment into nature-based solutions is, we've already been doing this thing with climate adaptation, ecosystem-based adaptation, and we're just going to call it overseas development aid. And I guess my bigger thing on this slide is about the idea that a lot of the literature that we're seeing on nature-based solutions is about stories and telling these really positive, lovely stories about how nature helped us solve a bunch of challenges. But we don't take the idea of evidence as seriously when it comes to social science as we do when it comes to the biophysical side of nature-based solutions. And we accept the victors are telling the story, saying this nature-based solution is really fantastic. Look at how great this thing is. And we accept that story as evidence because it's social stuff, and social stuff is woolly, and we don't need actual evidence. And I think part of that is that we're treating the social side of nature-based solutions, even though nature-based solutions are supposed to be providing like co-benefits, like societal benefits in terms of society and economy. And we are treating those socioeconomic benefits as a marketing opportunity more so than like we need to demonstrate that we've actually achieved those societal gains. And sorry, I know that I am probably all out of time. So, but if you look at the reference there at the bottom, you can see someone else has written about this idea around co-production and co-design actually requires capacities to do this. We can't just have funders saying, do co-production and co-design, go off, do it. We need people that have the expertise in doing that have the networks to be able to do that are able to facilitate that co-production and co-design, and build those into our requirements, resourcing, and organizational norms, that actually is something that we should do in a meaningful way and not just so we're going to implement this nature-based solution. What do you think about that? And mechanisms as well to consider those trade-offs and synergies, because going back to that co-benefits idea, if you are going to have social, economic, environmental co-benefits of nature-based solutions, you need to take all three of them seriously and consider how implementing something will necessarily have trade-offs across those different dimensions. And then, of course, plans that take that all seriously. So you are kind of forecasting that into the future and not doing this all just as a part of a funded project. So you need to like appease the funders. So I think that's it.
Yeah, wonderful presentations. Thank you very much. Without a further ado, I'm going to introduce to our next speakers. So Rachel Grice, she is a community manager for interventions at the RSA. Her work involves linking up RSA's policy and program work with their 31,000 strong global fellowship to create greater impact. Rachel is the community manager for our Playful Green Planet network, which is a movement of stewards who are co-creating nature-based play and learning experiences for children aged 0 to 11 in urban areas across the UK. And Rachel is joined by Catherine Pineo. She's the head of Regenerative Learning and Design at the RSA and leads on the Playful Green Planet initiative. Her passions are sustainable development, learning design, and where they intersect to drive system change. Before joining the RSA, Cathy worked on a variety of green economy projects in South Africa, supporting knowledge sharing, capacity building, and coordination between academia, industry, and government. So welcome, both of you, and thank you very much for your time. So over to you.
Thank you. I'll kick us off maybe with a broader overview. I'm Cathy Pineo. I'm the head of Regenerative Learning and Design, as was thoughtfully introduced. So I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by playful green infrastructure, what the importance of nature-based play means, and yeah, introduce us to our Playful Green Planet intervention, which Rachel is managing as community manager. So then I'll have her take us through kind of what that is, who we're working with, and what we kind of hope to achieve in the future. Just to start us off with just a fun prompt, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to just think, as a child, where did you have the most freedom to roam? You're welcome to post in the chat or just think that through yourself. Where did you have freedom to play? How did that make you feel? What did you learn and gain from that? Great. Well, what we typically find when we ask this question is many people will mention a time when they were outside, where they were directing the the activity, and often it's times when they were with peers, with kids of their own kind of age rather than adults. And this kind of links to the key elements of play, is that it's kind of something that's fun, that's uncertain, challenging, flexible, and with something that adults really struggle with. It's time that is spent that is not productive in any way. It's really about freedom, time, and space. So with that in mind, let's move on to looking at what is nature-based play, what is playful green infrastructure, and then we can talk a bit about what is PGP. So why nature-based play? Why is this something that the Royal Society of Arts is focused on? And that's really around its importance for children's learning, development, and well-being, which is really well documented. I'm happy to share these slides and have you look at some of the sources that we cite. But really importantly for the RSA, while we look at kind of the complex challenges facing our future and how we kind of build capabilities and skills, how to tackle that, is that nature-based play allows us to really look at how we grow children's climate action and social activism. You can't really care about what you don't connect to. And nature and Playful Green Planet is really about supporting kids to connect to nature and their community, and really growing their creativity and their agency to act in different ways and to support change. So what we mean by playful green infrastructure, I know many people in this webinar are experts in the green infrastructure side. What we mean when we talk about this is really about the intentional design and creation of green spaces that encourage and facilitate play. So the spaces, like any green infrastructure, can be natural or semi-natural areas. They provide nested benefits, but with the real focus on how they allow playful interactions, particularly child-led creative play. So some examples, it could be how you use natural features that children are able to use for play. So whether it's logs as bouncing beams or sand, mud areas for imagination, whether it's creating kitchens or creating houses. It also can include multifunctional spaces. So where you design areas that incorporate kind of green infrastructure, like maybe rainwater harvesting. It's also thinking about how that space can be used for children to explore in a safe way, how they can interact with those nature-based elements to learn about nature and to connect with one another. It can also include things like outdoor classrooms, so kind of structures that have been built that integrate nature elements and how that's kind of used in the learning and education alongside the play. So all of that we've kind of brought together into an intervention at the RSA called Playful Green Planet. And what it is really an initiative where we're trying to say, let's transform green spaces. These can be existing green spaces that are underused or underutilized in any way. And how do we make those into ecologically thriving outdoor playrooms or classrooms that grow children's connections to nature and their agency and activism around nature and the environment. And PGP is really about how we grow, connect, and support a movement of people who want to be doing this in their places with their community, and really creating spaces that are open and easily accessible to all children. So the main principles that we hold on to that guides our kind of work with students is that playful green spaces and experiences need to be for all children. So again, bringing in that kind of inclusive and accessible element. They need to be co-created in place. And I loved Sarah's talk, a lot of the challenges that she raised around co-created. is something that we've felt ourselves. And yeah, I feel like we'd have lots to catch up on around that. They have those triple benefits. So like any kind of green infrastructure, they look at that nested benefit, that how it benefits individuals, communities, and the wider environment. And that we really want these interventions to be sustainable. And what we mean by that is kind of embedded in the local offer, kind of running long term to address kind of deeper systemic issues and not just kind of pop up one-off events. So I am now going to hand over to Rachel, who works quite closely with our stewards, to talk through what a PGP activity could be and how we're working with others.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Yeah, so a PGP activity can look like a lot of different things, but ultimately it is an experience or an activity that engages children in sort of play in nature spaces with the intention of really supporting them to connect with nature and the sort of community around them. And these activities we look to be sort of beyond any sort of business as usual activities and in alignment with the 4 PGP principles that Kathy just aligned. And we've sort of had a mixed journey so far. We started this sort of intervention in 2022, while we sort of did a bit of research in our conceptual development, whilst also fundraising. Then at sort of the back end of 2024, we secured some funding through the National Lottery Community Action Fund, and we launched 2 pilot sites in Dundee and Hull, which we'll speak to a little bit more about shortly. And then sort of this year, we've really been focusing on sort of continuing the pilot, building on those outcomes, collecting the impact from them, and launching our sort of experimental network model throughout the RSA Fellowship, where we involve stewards, and we are aiming to recruit 2 stewards per quarter to join the PGP network and essentially co-create these experiences across the country and also utilise each other and the RSA as that sort of connector and convener to essentially support knowledge sharing, collective impact, and really just to showcase the work that these different sort of stewards and organisations are doing with Playful Green Planet. And our hope is that in the next couple of years, we're able to really grow the Playful Green Planet movement to 100 interventions, ideally by 2030. So we're ambitious. We also, I guess, started off our journey in targeting a couple of key strategic cities across the UK. These cities were sort of determined based on a triangulation of 3 criteria. We worked out that these are sort of based on high levels of deprivation, and we cross-reference these sort of results with the UK Office for National Statistics data on access to gardens and green spaces, and where these children in these areas had low outcomes, essentially, after they sort of go through school and their childhood. So we launched essentially after our pilot sites an open call for stewards in these 10 strategic cities, and these are sort of our priority cities throughout the UK where we believe a PGP can sort of have the most impact. And here is a little snapshot of some of the work our pilot stewards have been up to. This is sort of an example of how different Playful Green Planet sort of activities and experiences can look, but they're also really fantastic examples to bring to life what PGP really looks like. So in Dundee, the stewards are sort of a coalition, which are the Maxwell Community Centre, in coalition with Toadstool Trails, which is led by one of their local artists, and Rodney Mountain, who's at the Dundee Medical School Healthcare Improvement Team. So have that connection across community, sort of art and play, as well as health as well. The Dundee sort of stewards are really looking at the connection between the 3 and how nature-based play can impact all of those. And they've run some fantastic activities with PGP already. They've sort of co-designed a toadstool trail where the local artists have designed these beautiful toadstools, and the children have designed a map as to where to put them. And they work through the community gardens and work through that trail together, finding the mushrooms, exploring as they go. And that was actually successfully co-designed with children. despite some challenges that we know can occur with really meaningful co-production and design. And we also have our steward in Hull, which is the University of Hull School of Education, and their botanical gardens. And they're currently sort of developing their PGP. They are sort of a bit less mature than the Dundee stewards at the moment, but really setting up a co-design council and co-creation workshops with children to essentially start that process of getting these experiences and activities involved. The results so far of our pilot have been really encouraging to see. So far, we've engaged over 400 children through co-created outdoor play experiences, delivered over 1,600 hours of those sort of playful nature-based experiences, and we've really seen an increase in children's confidence and their connection to nature. We have transformed neglected green spaces into sort of really vibrant child-friendly hubs, and especially in Dundee and Hull, quite urban areas, and the location of the sort of PGP sites are really sort of based in the cities. It's been fantastic to see those green spaces sort of being used, and especially for play, learning, and for the communities to gather. We have built partnerships with more than 57 local institutions. These have included schools, nurseries, youth charities, environmental organisations, and sort of how PGP all comes together is really embedding into that coalition of community. And that sustainability principle really comes from that, engaging with a lot of groups and ensuring they are sort of embedded and involved as well. And then we have really seen some behavioural shifts as well, which has been fantastic to see, and really key to our impact, including the sort of intergenerational use of space, a much raised environmental awareness among children, and increased well-being of parents and carers as well. I know we're short on time, so I'll run through this slide really quickly. But as I mentioned before, we launched the PGP network, sort of the back end, the start of this year, forgive me. And essentially the network is made up of Playful Green Planet stewards, like the ones you saw in Dundee and Hull. And these stewards are organisations that are sort of already engaging with sort of children ages 0 to 11 and providing those services part of their existing offer. They have sort of access to green space, or we can connect them to green space if necessary. They are trusted within their local community and have sort of the time and capacity to participate in the PGP network in the sort of first 3 months when they get going. And what the RSA sort of as the convener of this network brings is an endorsement. So any Playful Green Planet stewards will have a letter and a sort of badge from us that endorses them as part of the PGP network. They get access to our lovely brand, which you can see plastered across this presentation. We've got some lovely cutouts and some gorgeous branding to really help amplify any of the work that they're doing. Similarly, we have quite a large platform that we work off with our journal, social media, our blogs, and we amplify the sort of work that they are doing if you're sort of a PGP steward in the network. We also have an open playbook that is almost like a Wikipedia of resources, learning tools, fundraising ideas to support any stewards engaging in a Playful Green Planet activity. And one of our most important sort of benefits, I suppose, is our collective impact tools. We have these triple benefit evaluation so that PGP stewards, wherever they are sort of down the line, can feed into a collective impact framework that they can use to support future funding bids, or really speak to the impact of the experiences that they are doing as part of PGP. And lastly, you sort of get the community of the network feel. You get myself as the sort of dedicated community manager. We also run monthly learning circles where the stewards can come together, share experiences, challenges, and also learn a bit about a specific topic that they might be interested in getting some support in or sharing on. And we're pleased to announce we've got 2 new network stewards that have joined the network in June. They're both based in London and across sort of really urban areas. And the first of those is Cody Dock, which is a community hub and gardens, and they're doing some brilliant work with children and that sort of co-creation in place. I'm really excited to be part of the network. Similarly, Redbridge Local Council have a site called Fell Waters Country Park, and they have a big regeneration scheme at the moment moving through there. And we are looking to support them with creating sort of those unstructured play spaces and activities for children that come through the Fell Waters Country Park. I'm not going to share this video because it's 4 minutes long, but we will share it in the chat. It's an excellent example from our Dundee site of what Playful Green Planet really looks like in action. It's got some content from the children that have been engaged, from the different sort of coalitions of people that are working through the Playful Green Planet in Dundee, and would highly recommend, if you do have the time, to watch it. And it does a really good job of bringing PGP to life, better than I or Kathy could. So yeah, I won't play it now, but do, if you can find the time to watch it, we'll share that link in the chat. And very lastly, on the whirlwind tour of PGP and Playful Green Infrastructure, a little bit about, if you are interested in getting involved, we are always actively growing our network. We are recruiting for stewards consistently. So if you work with or know any organisations that are already working with children aged 0 to 11 in urban areas, doesn't have to be in our 10 strategic cities, but we sort of prioritise those. Please do get in touch with me. My email's on the bottom of that screen. I'm sure it'll be sent around after this as well, and we can have a chat about joining the PGP network as a steward. If you are aware of the RSA and our fellowship, we also have an option open to fellows of the RSA to become champions for PGP, which is a sort of slightly lower lift role to be involved, whether you have experience in play, policy, education, ecology, environment, regreening, whatever that might look like, that you might want to support the network with in either sharing that expertise, having some conversations with stewards, or getting involved in some of our sites and our learning circles, and then that is an option as well if you're a fellow of the RSA. And lastly, we invite you to stay in touch. Follow us on social media, drop me an email if you're interested in talking about any more of this or becoming a steward, and that will be that. I will hold some space for questions now, Kathy. I don't know if you wanted to add anything at the end there.
No, happy to be guided by questions.
Fab. And yeah, that is us. Thank you so much for having us.
Yep, thank you very much. So for your talk, and I think both the talks have been brilliant and they complement each other quite well. I got a couple of questions actually, so maybe we could use like next few minutes to take up those questions. So one of them is from Jacqueline Blecher, and she have asked, what are the pitfalls of co-production, co-design, community engagement, etc., is not reporting back to the community to the outcomes of their participation? So the question really is, how do you address that reporting? Do you involve the community in actioning the nature-based solution, for example, community planting, maintenance, such as watering, etc.?
I'd like to welcome my cat to the chat, but I will just address this really quick. That I agree. Like, I think part of the reason we don't want to report back to the community, and maybe Jacqueline, you were thinking about something different, is that if you don't have the power to change what you're doing, there's a little bit of shame in like reporting back and be like, thank you for your comments. We weren't able to address those at all. And so I think actually some of those things about having that flexibility and having that time do help with that. And then I also think this is a much bigger question and a big topic of my research, but is that organizational shift of having it be okay to say that we did hear what you were saying, and this is how we took on board what we could, and this is why we couldn't take on board those other things. Because I don't think, like, one of the issues is, like, we shouldn't just take, oh, well, the community wants this, ergo that's the thing that we should do. That's not necessarily what co-production is all about. It's like there are lots of different views on what you might be able to do, and then there's also technical expertise on it, and being able to communicate that in a way that explains that whole range, I think actually requires like a shift in organizational norms, because it's different from reporting on, we had community consultation, we're reporting on all the submissions on the community consultation, and then we're going to go and continue doing what we want to do. So I actually think it is partly about changing those norms, which is huge and takes a lot of time, and changes to policies and other things. But then also changing the structures, like the funding structures and stuff that I talked about that allow you to actually make changes in response, because the community might have had a great idea and you then want to action it. And in terms of like involving the community, I think that's super important, because some of the only nature-based solutions that stayed in place in Liverpool were the ones where the community actually was involved in like implementing, maintaining, all of that. And I honestly think that's the only way in the future, because if you get funding for a discrete project, it pretty much never comes with maintenance, right? Like it's a well-known problem. If you get community buy-in and ownership over that thing, then they're going to want to maintain it. If you got children that, parents who are like super happy that their children were playing in it, then they're going to have invested ownership in actually wanting to maintain those things.
Great, yeah, thank you. So the next question is from Matt Kirby, and is asked, do you think the solutions framing of nature-based solutions is unhelpful? Would nature-based interventions allow projects to have more open co-design and grounded outcomes?
I saw that.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that and I was thinking about that, Matt. That's a very good question. I think it probably would, I actually think interventions is better, unless it sounds too technical. I don't know. It is a question to ponder more, but I think solution does raise the question of solutions for whom, a bit like resilience is like resilience of what to what. There's a lot of questions that emerge, and solutions is like solutions for whom, to what, who decides who the problems are. I think it would, it seems more neutral, but I don't have a very good answer for that. I think, it seems like a good idea.
Rachel and Catherine, do you think you have any view on that?
I would say my job title includes the term interventions, which actually can be a bit off-putting sometimes, and it can sound quite drastic, I think, at times, and I think it's much more programs as my community title, but I think it really depends on the audience you're speaking to as well, and I agree that solutions might be, preempting the result a bit early, but I'm not sure, again, what a better term might be, because interventions does sound quite serious as well, when it may well be very serious, but can be a bit scary, I guess, in those terms.
Yeah, I responded to Lee in the chat. We found limited engagement. I think it's regarded as quite academic, and I think often when people hear the word intervention as well, they think drug and alcohol related. So it can also be quite limiting. So we've kind of gradually shifted how we refer to things as projects and programs. Like Rachel said, also maybe to stay away from what is necessarily a solution. And there's something that is kind of community owned for the greater good.
Okay, so I'll pick up the last question because we're running out of time now. So this is from Kathy to Sarah. Sarah, could you talk a bit more about the issues related to evidence and storytelling? How do we build a culture that asks how the story of impact is underpinned and recognizes co-creation and the contributions of wider community?
It's a super good question. So I actually talk about transformative in my book, and I'm a bad academic because I should have my books like behind me while I'm talking, but I do think stories are important, and I kind of touched on it in a way that made it seem like I think stories are rubbish, and I don't. I think actually that's how humans engage with things, is through stories, and I think we find stories super compelling. I think we just need to view data. Science is also storytelling, and we need to get better at, first of all, respecting the fact that social science is science. I do have a mug somewhere that I should have also had, that social science is also science, and that we should respect that as we are telling the story of how this has benefited the community, but we have data to show for it. It might not be the data that you're used to if you're an engineer or an ecologist or whatever, but here's the data that we do have. And then also the idea that that we get better at using data, even quantitative data, to tell stories in a more effective way. Because I think the cynicism sets in if we just keep trying to tell positive stories, but we don't have the evidence to back it up. And so while we might get away with it for a little while, I think that's where I was, giving Scousers, big props for having their deep skepticism, because they're like, okay, we understand what's good about greening, but why don't you show us what's good? So those are my initial thoughts.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you very much. I think we will close now the question and answer. We can do almost a minute over. So just to close the webinar. So first of all, can we give a big applause to all our 3 fantastic speakers who have done a brilliant job to bring in a very complementary perspective of nature-based solutions and their co-design and implementation, bringing in the real-world case studies. So this is amazing. Yeah, thank you very much. So we got, just to also announce, our webinar number 40 is going to be next month on 3rd of September, same time. We got 2 fantastic speakers. The one is Steve Archer, so he'll be he's representing Environmental Agency, and then we got one of our team members, Rana Al-Abbas Mustafa. So we have been working on the urban greening how-to toolkit for local councils. So it's a collaborative effort. So we will be presenting that toolkit, in this webinar. So before you go, so if you are not the member of the network, so you could become a member. So if you just click on reclaim-network.org, or you just do Reclaim Network Plus in Google search, and on the right-hand side, on the top corner, you'll find a link. You can become a member for free. You'll start getting the updates on the opportunities, and you could also then connect to a lot of people who are working in this area, going and accessing the members page. If you wanted to be a speaker, just drop a line to us, and we'll be very happy to do that. And there is a presence on the LinkedIn and X as well. So if you are there, please follow us or tag us, and we'll be very happy to promote any of the activities you have been doing in this particular area. So the whole idea of the network is just to bring people together, help them, and bring the science of sustainability, science of urban greening, and the experience together for a better the urban sustainable environments. So with that, I would like to thank again to all of you for your time and listening, and this will be available on the YouTube, so you can refer it. So if you're a member, you'll get the newsletter with the link and all the information related to this webinar and the previous webinar there. So thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate your time, and a special thanks to our speakers and Charlotte for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you
so
all.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.